Welcome to the Atheist in Recovery podcast, where we talk about finding hope in recovery. And now your host, Dr. Adina Silvestri.
Hola, Atheists in Recovery, and welcome to episode 80 of the Atheists in Recovery podcast. And today we are talking to Elizabeth Cush, all about trauma-sensitive mindfulness. And so in today's episode, we talk a little bit about Elizabeth's deepest roots in her early years, growing up with childhood emotional neglect. And as being an adult looking back, she recognized that she took that pain that she was living with and began to use substances to cope, which is a very familiar theme. Yeah. We talk about the biggest challenges now as she's a practitioner in helping people with trauma start to work through the pain and develop a mindfulness practice, and how mindfulness and meditation can really decrease the chances of using substances to numb, and just really creating that stopgap when you have a mindfulness practice, because you're more aware and your awareness is just more enhanced, maybe, of what's happening inside your body. And you're just less likely to, when you feel the pain, to reach for the bottle or the drug, because it's just this emotional and cognitive awareness of the self. And so it's very helpful. Okay, let's talk about Elizabeth Cush. Elizabeth is a licensed clinical professional counselor, business owner, and blogger in Annapolis, Maryland, where she hosts Worriers, a podcast for anxious women. In her private practice, progression counseling, she helps men and women who feel overwhelmed, anxious, and stressed out find more connection with themselves and others, allowing them to live their lives with more ease, intention, and purpose. She's worked in the mental health field for over 10 years and is a certified clinical trauma professional, and she incorporates mindfulness and meditation into her psychotherapy work with individuals and groups. You can find Elizabeth at progressioncounseling.com, and for more information on Elizabeth and how to connect with her and any of the links in the podcast, you can find that at atheistinrecovery.com/episode 80. All right, guys, let's get started. Elizabeth Cush, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adina. I so appreciate your asking me to be on. I'm excited.
Yes, me as well. So I want to start our conversation just by getting to know, I'm always interested in learning how people sort of get to where they are in life. And so I'm wondering if we can start this conversation by just inquiring about your deepest roots from childhood.
Wow. So grew up in a middle-class family in Philadelphia, and parents were together. I'm one of 4 kids, so 2 girls, 2 boys. I'm in the middle with my sister, the younger of the 2 sisters. So I'm a younger sister, 3rd child. I think that's impacted who I am in terms of, sometimes not feeling seen and heard, being middle child. But 2, my mother and sister were very close, just her being older. But my parents divorced when I was probably middle school. And that really turned our whole family kind of upside down. Our family pretty much, it was an ugly divorce, an affair. My dad moved across the country. It was hard. And our family pretty much, I say it shattered. It was tough. So that has shaped me in a lot of ways, has helped me learn how to be very independent but also very committed to, when I did get married, that we're going to make this work. I do not want to. So I am married and have been we just celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary, which is crazy.
Congrats.
Thank you. And have 3 young men, all launched and successful and thriving as well as can be in these times.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so and that family, my family that I've created with my husband really has kept me rooted in myself. Like for the longest time, I was like, all I want to do is be a mom. And that I found out wasn't fulfilling enough.
Mm.
And really wasn't sure where I wanted to put my energies in the world. So I've done I've waited tables, I've managed restaurants, I worked in
Wow.
retail. Managed a big department for Bloomingdale's for a period of time, did daycare, worked in a preschool, and then decided it was I didn't complete my undergrad degree for a lot of reasons in my 20s. So went back when my baby, who is now 24, when he was born, went back to school, got my undergrad degree. Took a long time, took one class at a time. And then,
Wow, that sounds painful.
Yeah. Well, I did it online back when online school wasn't that big a thing.
Okay.
I did a lot of it online so I could do it at home and work. And yes, it took a long time. But then by the time I finished, my oldest kids were ready to go to college. So I wanted to get my master's, but we really couldn't afford because my two oldest are 17 months apart. So their college tuitions were boom, boom together. So we really couldn't afford to send me back to school for my master's. So I waited. And once they graduated, I went back and graduated with my master's when my youngest graduated from high school. So I'm a late bloomer, I could consider myself. And started my private practice when I was 53. So
Wow.
yeah.
So this is like a new, well, I don't know how new it is, but it was a new chapter for you then, for sure.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. And I had been working in the mental health field. So I worked during the time that I was completing undergrad and getting my master's and just finding, just working. I was working at a local hospital in their domestic violence program. So the hospital had a it was basically a trauma response group. So if a child came in with abuse or a woman was either sexually assaulted or had been assaulted in a relationship issue, we were called in and did some crisis counseling, offering resources, following up to make sure they were safe. So I did that for 10 years while I was going into getting my master's and doing private practice. Yeah. So it was quite a journey, but really solidified how important it was for me to work with women. That was really the thing I think I took away from that. There's so many obstacles and potential traumas in our lives that to be able to support women through therapy was really important for me.
And I'm wondering too, how much of that, those formative years weighed on your decision to be in the helping profession, because I feel like you have to, you give a lot in this field. And so, if you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Oh, definitely. I think for me, recognizing and this really came later in life, but it's really shaped my therapy practice, is that recognizing how much a lack of emotional attunement parents with children can have on your adult life really has helped me better help the women who come to see me with similar issues. So, when there is what, we now call childhood emotional neglect or attachment issues, it impacts all of our relationships and I think, just talking about, the fact that your podcast is a recovery podcast too, that I managed all those really hard emotions because I didn't know how to with substances. I smoked a lot of pot. I turned to cocaine at one point. I'm not proud of that, but I recognized too that I just did not know how to manage my emotional state. And and so, yes, that definitely my formative years have shaped how I approach therapy, but also my understanding of how to be better attuned with ourselves and work to help women and men find that more authentic way of living.
Yeah. Thanks for
Mhm.
that.
Sure.
So you are a trauma specialist
Mhm.
and you incorporate mindfulness and meditation into your work. And that's, that was part of the reason why I wanted you to come on,
Mhm.
because I feel like, well, for a lot of individuals I see, mindfulness and meditation, those are dirty words. And so you want me to do what, Adina?
Oh, that's funny.
So I thought maybe we could start a little broad and then sort of narrow as we go, or not. We'll see.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but who do you sort of see in your practice mostly, and maybe what are some of those challenges that you're helping
Mm,
people with? Yeah.
yeah. So I am absolutely a trauma specialist but market myself more as an anxiety specialist. So
Mm.
because a lot of what I experienced because of the childhood emotional neglect that I experienced, that I had a lot of anxiety around big emotions. So I learned how to not feel them pretty early on, not to
Mhm.
ask for big needs. And that created a lot of anxiety for me. So I know what that's like to live with an extreme amount of anxiety, and I wanted to be able to help others.
Mhm.
So my mindfulness practice and my meditation practice has really helped me manage my anxiety. And so the women that I market to, but I see men and women, come to me for typically anxiety or relationship issues due to anxiety, that it's impacting their life. They're so stressed out at work. They're so stressed out with their boss. They're having trouble in their partnerships or their, mothering or whatever it is. So they're coming for help for that. And often there's underlying trauma.
And Elizabeth, I wonder if we could just define childhood emotional neglect for people that don't know what that is.
Sure, sure. So childhood emotional neglect is when you are raised in a family with parents or caregivers who have not learned how to manage their own emotional needs. So maybe they were raised by parents who also couldn't manage their emotional needs. So emotions aren't validated, they aren't promoted. So if you're really stressed out or really scared and you go to your parent and say, I'm freaking out about this test, and they're like, oh, it's no big deal. Get over it. Suck it up. So
Yes. Sounds like my childhood.
yeah. Well, and in my family, like my sister and I joke, like we say, buck up. Like that's what you do. You just buck up. You
You
get in
do.
there and
Yeah.
you handle it. And so you learn early on how to deal with those emotions, but the way you learn is to put them away. Like that's the message.
Mhm.
Don't
Mhm.
have them. Don't be too big with them. Figure out how to manage it yourself.
Mhm.
So oftentimes with clients, if I ask, like, who did you go to when things were really hard?
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, I just kind of figured out how to do it on my own. I'd
Right.
go to my
Right.
room, I'd read a book, I'd go cry. So that to me is a sign like, okay. And I have learned, I used to hold a lot of resentment toward my parents, but I
Mm.
have learned that they weren't given the skills either. Like
Mm.
it wasn't because they were bad parents. They provided in a lot of really great ways. And I know they loved me, but I wasn't given the skills to figure out how I was feeling and how to manage these big feelings on my own.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because maybe they didn't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that can lead to a lot of avoidance, pushing away, sometimes using substances to dull or numb food. Yeah. Nowadays, social
Mhm.
media to numb the feelings because we really don't know how to tolerate them.
Yeah. So alcohol and drugs become those go-to
Yeah. Yeah. They can for sure.
strategies. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that as difficult as it can be, when especially for new clients, and you're saying, well, I really want you to learn how to feel your feelings.
Oh God, that's the worst thing that I can say. Really, that's like the worst thing.
But it's so true, right? Like we have to figure out how to handle, we have to know what we're feeling.
I'm going to start with diagrams. Maybe that's the next thing that I need to do. Diagrams.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Kidding aside, mindfulness and meditation has been shown to really transform people's healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you think the biggest challenges are with helping individuals with anxiety or maybe depression or just, how do they deal with that? How do they work through that? Because once you put down the alcohol and the drugs, you have to replace it with something.
Yes. Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges for people with anxiety, but depression too, is that, yes, when you decide like, okay, the substances aren't working the way they did, that I'm avoiding, I'm not feeling, or I'm just putting aside until later.
Yeah.
It's like learning that as hard as it is to feel the emotional stuff, it doesn't kill us. Like sometimes it feels like it's going to, like it doesn't pull us under. Yes, we can feel bad for a while, but that passes. Like the anxiety, the depression, unless you are like seriously clinically depressed and need to be on medication or having panic attacks, where you're not leaving your home. Like if you're dealing with sort of generalized anxiety or depressive symptoms, like these come and go. You feel bad sometimes, but you have good days too. And I think what's hard to remember when we're in it is that this too will pass. And for me, that's where mindfulness can be so helpful, and a meditation practice, that all of this comes and goes, the good and the bad.
Yeah, I love what you just said, and I just want to highlight it because I feel like I have this conversation on a weekly, if not daily basis, is that the emotions will pass and there's no way around it. Can I get better? I hear this question all the time. Can I get better without having to work through the pain? And then I know it's scary, and I know that you're using the substances so that you don't have to go through the pain. Those are our defense strategies for what ails us.
Yeah.
But if we could just put like a time limit on it, okay, you're only going to feel this much pain for this amount of time. I know that's not realistic, but yeah, maybe you could talk to that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that is a hard, I think oftentimes with new clients, especially, but even older clients too, like, why isn't this going faster? Or why do I continue to get tripped up by this? What if it's a trigger or a person or a thing? Why does it feel like I'm going 3 steps backwards each time I hit this roadblock? But, how I try to approach that is saying, most of my clients are probably 35 and older, so I want to say to them, you have been dealing with this like this in the same ways for 35 years. Like you've turned to these coping mechanisms that worked to begin with because you had to figure out how to get through, right? But now you're realizing it's not helping anymore, but we've got to rewire, we've got to redo that 30 years of doing to start to do things differently. And it just takes time. And even when it feels like there isn't forward motion, there is. And it might just be a slight shift, a little bit more awareness that you're knowing that, oh yeah, that thing happened. And I went back to those old habits, but I know it. I can see that I did it. Yeah.
You noticed it. You acknowledged it.
Yeah. And to me, like that is what I like to then bring to the forefront. Okay. Yep. Sure. You fell backwards, but you saw, even looking back, you were like, oh, it was that thing that did it. And now I can remember, that's your brain sort of solidifying that memory of, oh yeah, I have to be aware if I'm entering into a certain similar situation, this could trip me up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just need some awareness so I can take care of myself and maybe do better this time.
These are the consequences, and you need to be able to bring them up quickly before you
Yeah,
take that next drink or that next
right.
hit. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, awareness is just such a huge, huge, huge component of growth and moving forward. And that's where mindfulness and meditation can play a role to bring a greater awareness to all the things that are happening inside you.
I love that.
Mhm.
Mm. So the next thing on my mind is if we are maybe newly recovered, or maybe we're right out of the hospitalization,
Mm.
what would you recommend? How would you recommend getting started with a mindfulness practice? Like maybe what are some tools that you recommend? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think for anyone coming out of recovery at whatever stage you're in,
Mm-hmm.
one of the key parts of mindfulness is the non-judgment. Like, so being kind to yourself around how hard it is, but being
Mm-hmm.
kind to yourself around the potential missteps, mistakes. So self-compassion, a self-compassion practice, learning how to not give yourself a pass, which I think a lot of people think, well, I'm just allowing myself to make mistakes, but it's owning that we're human and that we all
Mm-hmm.
make mistakes and that we can't get this next thing perfectly because we're human. We just can't. Like we're going to mess up. And whether that's, falling into old patterns of behavior, whether that's relapse, whatever that might be, to be kind to yourself around that I've made a mistake. I can be kind to myself within this mistake and do it differently next time.
Mm-hmm.
But more practical. So there is a whole website, selfcompassion.org,
Hmm.
by Kristen Neff. She's a researcher in self-compassion. And so she has exercises and
Great.
meditations that are free there on the website, plus all of her research, which is amazing.
Okay.
So that's a great resource.
Yeah. And I'll link to that in the show notes.
Awesome. But apps are a good way to start for anybody who is considering starting a meditation or mindfulness practice. There are
Mm-hmm.
some really great, like Insight Timer has hundreds of thousands, I think, of free meditations. And you can also choose to purchase the app and get, I think it's a yearly fee, and you get all their courses and everything.
Okay.
But there's a lot of free stuff there with a lot of different practitioners. So I think it's important that you find someone whose voice you like, whose message
Mm-hmm.
resonates with you. And there's a lot of people you can try. That's why I
Okay.
like that Insight Timer. Yeah. Yeah. And I've got a couple meditations there. Just full
Ooh.
disclosure. Yeah. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head in terms of a mindfulness daily, sort of getting
Okay.
more mindfulness into your life. But there are often free courses like 30-day mindfulness class, that are
Mm-hmm.
free that other mindfulness practitioners are offering. It feels like all the time. So you could Google it, you could search out a 30-day mindfulness challenge or something like that.
Okay.
And that was kind of how I got started.
I use Headspace.
Yeah, I've heard great stuff about Headspace and Calm. I've heard
And
clients really like
yeah,
Calm too.
people really like Calm. Headspace, I love the voice.
See,
Andy's voice on the Headspace, so I use that a lot.
yeah, and I think that is so, like, you want to feel sort of almost bathed in their calm energy, whatever that is. That yeah,
Mm-hmm.
finding those voices that resonate with you, and that's so different for every person.
Mm-hmm.
So finding the ones that make you feel relaxed is important. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could probably talk for another hour, but I know that we're running low on time. So we'll just have to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Oh my gosh, you made it very easy to talk.
So Elizabeth, before you go, I have one more question. You have
Yeah.
a podcast called Women Worriers.
I do.
Yeah, and you focus on helping women to build a caring, compassionate relationship with their anxiety. And I love this part, unleash the warrior within.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you could talk a little bit about, what informed your decision to start this podcast?
Mm. Well, as I said, like I am a woman warrior, right? I struggle. I still have days, mostly nights, late nights, where my anxiety peaks and I understand how hard it can be to live a life of stress and anxiety. But I know too, there's so many things that contribute to the anxiety and stress that we hold as women.
Mhm.
So I wanted to bring to light sort of some of the potential traumas that are impacting the anxiety we carry, but also offering options, ways to help and support women be more connected within themselves so that they can live a more productive, purposeful, easeful life.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And so, how can the listeners best find you and say hi on the social?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Woman Worriers, also on Facebook, same thing. My website is my business website. It's progressioncounseling.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there. I do a monthly blog, and within the newsletter, you also get all the updates on the new podcast episodes. So the podcast is there at progressioncounseling.com/woman warriors.
Awesome. All right, Miss Elizabeth. Well, thank you again for being on.
Adina, thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Atheists in Recovery podcast. For more great info and to stay up to date, head over to atheistsandrecovery.com.